Hello, and welcome to Cultivate and Collaborate, where we sit down with global leaders across agri-food and agribusiness, talking about leadership, problem solving, and how to create partnerships that move our industry forward. We're excited to share trends in agri-food software and data, along with growing opportunities for collaboration and innovation across the entire supply chain. It's all right here on Cultivate and Collaborate. I'm Rich Reynertson, President and CEO of Cultura Technologies, and thank you for listening. Jeff, welcome to Atlanta. Came out of the freezing cold from Omaha.
And brought it here.
Yeah,
yes.
And brought it here. Flight delays, got in late last night. I can't believe you've been in agriculture for how many years?
Really, my whole life.
Yeah, and this
so
is your first visit to the International
Protein Processors.
It used to be called, we used to call it the Chicken Show.
Yes.
And now it's moved to outside of just chickens to pork and swine and feed milling and processing. Mm-hmm. So what'd you think? You were there for the first time today, right?
Yes. Eye-opening on every level. Yeah. There was booths for acres, and I wore out a pair of shoes walking all the different aisles and seeing that.
Even though you've been at ConAgra, you've been at Art Mills, you've been at Schooler, your farm, your dad owns trucking business, eye-opening.
Yeah, just eye-opening. I can't imagine how many. I never had a clue on how many hardware manufacturers there are, all the different styles and types and natures of protein production. All the different businesses, I've never seen that before.
Imagine being born a chicken and thinking, someday I could be a McNugget. We can make that happen in like a minute and a half.
Right there.
Without touching. You just drop it in one end and it comes out McNuggets on the other side. And you can see that at IPPE.
You really can. You can see the, egg to next year it's going to be egg to McNugget.
Yeah, there you go.
You don't even have to have the chicken itself. You just put the
Wall Street probably shouldn't go, or they'd all turn vegan.
Maybe so, but the shocking thing was the amount of people that showed up. 50,000 people all over the world. The level of interest in that particular show is off the charts, and I think the other part of that was eye-opening to me was. You have integration of feed and protein production, which I think is a great sign for us.
Yeah, I remember 20 years ago I was at the show, and the AFIA, with a short period afterwards, had a show down in Orlando. Mm-hmm. And an individual showed up to talk to us from Fagioli's. Fagioli's is a fast food Italian restaurant, pasta. Showed up to American Feed Industry Association show. And it's like, what the fish is this guy doing?
Yeah.
And he looked at us back then and he said, from the time someone shows up at my order to the window to get to a soccer game, if I don't deliver a hot meal to them for less than $5 in a minute and a half, my sales drop 20%. Now, if you've got 1,500 stores, imagine what it takes to actually make that happen. And that includes the pasta, the cream, the chicken that goes on it, the whole thing. And he looked at the audience and said, you guys are a key part of it. And back then, we thought, how is that possible? Like, we keep hearing we're just one step back, one step forward. That's changing in the industry. It's not just where I got it, where I send it, and what I did with it in between. It's the consumer wants to know from start to finish what happened. Mm-hmm. But we live in a very disconnected world. Mm-hmm. So any conversations about that you had?
Yeah, it's... the thing about a show like that, it's really just protein processing, but not just for food. So they've kind of started the process of saying everything from production has to be fed, everything that has to be fed has to be treated, everything is treated has to be processed, and then out the door. And that show is built so that the very parts of those parts of that supply chain actually have to talk, and they're in the same show, and they have conjoined discussions at the same time. So they're starting to realize it's better if we have those big parts of the industry that at one time were super siloed, get together, have those conversations together, and find out things like the consumer wants something in 5 minutes. Oh, well, that's different. How did that happen? Well, the reason is, and then they figured that out. But if they didn't have that discussion at all, they go on doing the same things they think they should be doing. And it may just be a miss. What's ultimately impressive on something like that is they listen to the consumer. They have a consumer guy, like somebody who's, not the buyer or the Krogers of the world or any of the big chains. They have people who are consumers talk about those requirements, and they're of different age groups too. So you can go into the track and hear a consumer talk about, I want, cage-free, all the different new requirements that in that audience mean something to that group. They're like, okay, well, we didn't realize it. We had all that information, and the consumer really wanted that information.
Yeah, it used to be that when you picked up something at a grocery store, right, all of the expensive stuff is around the outside of the aisle. And it's the fresh stuff. It's where you find, the fruit and the vegetables and the milk and the cheese. Mm. The inside is the stuff that can stay on the shelf for a long period of time, right? The oatmeal, the canned soups, and all that stuff. And then they started this little section off to the side that was the expensive section. It's the natural. I got this one. I'm going to go in the natural food section, but maybe if I don't have that big of a budget, I'm not going to go buy protein-enriched oatmeal right in this special section. I'm still just going to go get my Quaker Oats. Instagram or whatever that is in the middle aisles. But today the consumer is starting to read.
Yeah.
They're starting to take a look at the label, right? So if it says natural, you kind of want to know what natural means. It's not just a marketing ploy. It's for organic.
Or healthy.
Yeah. So,
or what does that mean?
Why does there have to be a label that explains organic or 100% organic?
I think we're getting there. I think even the recent news today where you'd say they inverted the food triangle. So if that's the consumer's guidance, this is what healthy means. Are you eating that ratio? And I think that changes the game. I mean, I grew up thinking it was the other way around. Eat a lot of breads, eat a lot. Now they're going to invert it and say no, eggs, steak, big heavy things. And I think the consumer, in your example where you were using a little tiny section that was kind of exclusive to a certain audience that was really, into health, that section is 3 times the size now than it was 5 years ago. It kind of took over a whole corner of the store where they have their own freezers and they have their own, they have certain display, and it's all kind of meeting. And when does the consumer actually turn over the label? I think they've gotten even more sophisticated than reading the label. They have, they go out and they download apps and they scan the barcode, and like this app, this label doesn't actually meet your requirements that you've profiled. I think the consumer is getting that sophisticated these days.
Well, we've seen some of that in other parts of the world, right? So I saw a demonstration of a woman in Singapore looking at a chicken breast and scanning the barcode and seeing a picture of the driver that brought the meat, or the warehouse where it was stored, or the farm where it was raised, or the factory where it was processed, right outside of it. But here in the West, those are all very disconnected parts. So are you seeing more collaboration between all those disconnected parts to be able to bring that to the table without someone having to actually acquire the entire back end of the channel?
I would say in certain spaces you see dramatic growth. Think about Driscoll's strawberries. I can scan a Driscoll's product, and it'll tell me exactly what farm and field it came from, and the exact day that it was harvested, and where it was processed. So they're getting there in certain spaces, and Driscoll's, in that one experiment that happened 4, 5, 6 years ago, they've seen a dramatic increase in their product quality expectations, their consumer expectations, and ultimately, that's one particular part of the fresh fruit industry. But I think that same analogy applies. If that expectation worked there, it should work other places. So I'm starting to see it tip over, but it has to be the volume foods too. And that's where I think your example in the other parts of the world, it's just, they set the railroad up, and now everything gets tracked, and you're enriching that food's storyline to the consumer through the use of data, tying the data into the product. And that really that's the signal. If you start seeing, and not just a guidance or an expectation, but the consumer just expects that to be there, the whole industry has to align around it.
Well, the consumer expects it. I think you and I talked previously, because I think being you and I are veterans of providing IT services in the industry. When you get into the business complications, it's easy on a spreadsheet or maybe in a PowerPoint presentation or developing a workflow what might happen. But some of the impediments we've seen is Okay, so you're telling me I've got a way to maximize the value of what I get from the DDGs coming out of an ethanol plant, or wheat bits coming out of a flour mill, or a particular way I grow something, or a particular supplier that I use. And then the question becomes, if that creates extra value, which part of the value chain actually gets that value? Is it way at the front end? Is it the back end? Is there a way to distribute that? And I think last year you co-authored an article with US Grains about digitally enhanced commodities. And so it's not just weights and grades that people care about. It's weights and grades, how it was grown, what was used to grow it, when you're talking about meat, milk, egg, or produce, or row crops, right, or tree grown commodities. How's that? How do you see that playing out in the future?
Yeah, I think that that data enrichment process is very similar to other industries, is working this very similar way in other industries. Those extra attributes that you tie to the commodity, they have to be shared. The value of creating that new commodity has to be shared all the way up and down the supply chain. Because if one part of the supply chain breaks, it doesn't come out the end. So you have to have that incentive fly all the way back.
But shared in an auditable way, right?
Very provable.
Some parts of the world call it like an attestation.
Yeah.
Which is a funny way of saying it's been audited, and some third party agrees that this is what happened, and you can trust us.
Right.
And there's some teeth behind that. Right?
There has to be something that's tied it into the actual financial exchange. The buyer, the seller have to agree that it's going to be a bulletproof evidence that you're going to provide, or it breaks down at some point in time. That's what that article was all about. It was, can you do that? First and foremost, common sense would say you can. Everything today collects data. Everything. Why wouldn't you use that data to enrich the product that you're producing and then share that upstream? Why did you just keep it in silos? It made no sense. When you have all those things going that can go to the supply. So you've got food, feed, fiber, and I think fuel also. You think, what's the supplier of fuel want? Well, what they want is lower energy produced fuel that they can gather. And agriculture's, given recent announcements here that says our new customer in a certain space for corn is going to be a new fuel buyer. Ethanol's been produced really in volume since the 80s, but they're going to ratchet that up big time by having the blender have that fuel, and then being able to trace where they got the fuel from adds value to them. So it applies to lots of spaces.
Well, and having it at testable might be like nirvana. Yeah. We've seen some technology plays that said, okay, this is what we have to do, and who has to do it, and the farmer has to do this in order to get benefit out of it. But we've also seen where there's enough financial incentive where if it's not like 100% accurate or testable, some insurance companies are saying, well, if you actually do this and provide this data and it's not bulletproof, we'll sell, there's enough value here that we'll create an insurance policy to limit your risk. The more accurate it becomes, the less insurance you have to buy. Am I dreaming that up, or have we seen that?
We're absolutely seeing that. Yeah. So you're creating spreads and margins in places in the value chain that you couldn't before. A basic commodity is sold for minimal quality attributes 20, 30 years ago. But if your insurance company and your banker look at the way that you're producing your output and saying you're doing a whole bunch of things right, we know this is going to be valued by the consumer. I can underwrite a better insurance policy for you because I know you're thinking ahead and you're forward looking at all the way out to the consumer. I'm seeing that the bank lending facilities say, hey, I believe that you're going to create new spread in that marketplace. Those things are also being seen, especially when it comes to a lot of the growers. And we started to see this a little bit in an organic grower was getting certainly a different margin. So it kind of started with organics, but it's hard to prove. They had organic requirements, and it would take you 3 years.
Not just organic grower. There's a certain portion of the UK consumer that will pay a little bit more for milk on the shelf if there's a claim that cow is a bit happier, defined as spending at least X number of days in the field versus just sitting in a parlor, which has nothing to do with the weight and grade and quality of scientifically of what is on the shelf.
People see that as super unique. I don't see that as unique. If you have a restaurant that produces really, really good food using fresher value, and you go to that restaurant, they're high end, and you pay more, that's the same principle. It's just being applied at the end where the consumer says, I know you use the freshest product and this is the best. And you have some, you trust it. The trust element has to be along with the data enrichment element, has to be along with the commitment. And then the financials all have to kind of come into play. It's that all those things are happening. Even the market price makers are starting to recognize that there can be a difference between just basic quality grade stuff that goes into a commodity and comes out the other end. They're saying, hey, I do think we're going to see that price spread happen in different spaces. You talk to some financial person or somebody who's been in agriculture a long time, and you'll see an eyebrow raised, and they're like, "Oh, it doesn't sound right." But in all honesty, the rationale is there, and the consumer trends are going to demand it for all forms of agricultural production.
You and I don't think heavily about just the farm.
No,
we have customers from the people that service the farm, the people that acquire things from the farm, those that process things from the farm, those that create distribution channels off of primary and secondary processing pieces, all the way out to food service, right? And that side of it, not just in North America, but in Europe. And we think about all those different supply chains and the data that has to flow. Something's happened in the last couple of years. It's been around since the late 40s, but now it's exploded. And not just in agriculture, but globally. And that's this thing called AI, like artificial intelligence. People have been claiming I'm artificially intelligent for a long time, but that's another story. This if it's artificial, why would you listen to it? Anyways, this whole kind of supply chain piece, and as us technologists, we've been talking, you got to rewrite the software every 3 years, or we have to enforce standards to make it easy to collect, which has bothered me for years. It's like, why should we enforce our standards on someone who doesn't want to change systems? But AI now has the ability, with some learning, to help pull together data that before would have taken massive amounts of time, energy to make happen. So where do you see that heading into the future? Is that going to be part of agriculture, outside of agriculture? And trying to help, solve some of the needs we have about a more flexible, robust, resilient, and transparent supply chain as we think about it.
Yeah, I think if you just set the technology, which is impressive, aside, and say, what is the business problem that you're trying to solve, and what could it solve? The biggest challenge, I think, in agriculture where it sticks is agriculture is a fragmented world. You have lots and lots of players and a very long supply chain, and they all use their own systems and their own data. And up until this point, it is extremely complicated to, weave disparate things together and try to create, better decision making. What AI does and machine learning, it allows you to take away all those problems. It can learn how those systems talk in their own language, and then it can translate between different systems without having, like, our career, which was, building something that translated and having business rules. This capability,
primarily, you and I, we spent 2-3 decades building systems of record, right, to allow our customers to get information into a central part that they could use, whether it be financial or on grain contracts or ticketing or whatever that deal is. And now that data has to be lit up across a chain, and we didn't transactionalize everything. There's still spreadsheets and PDFs and Word documents and verbal conversations and agreements that go up and down the supply chain. And you're saying that AI, instead of having to now continue to build transactional systems and enforce standards on everybody, that AI has the propensity, or at least the hope, that it could ease that flow up and down. But along with that comes some security risks, or perceived security risks, as these big transactional systems, people try to hold on and protect that data versus having it converse with other pools. think about, I know when we revitalized the Cultura brand 2 years ago, we said we want to keep what made us strong, like strong independent businesses focusing on parts of the supply chain, but acting more collaboratively across the supply chain with our customers. And so you came on board and forming industry circles. And part of the premise behind that was, like, I can't teach 13 businesses how to be collaborative and business entrepreneurs and all that fun stuff. They're all over the planet. So how would we do that? And there was a CEO group in Atlanta that I was sharing this issue with. And the guy looked at me and he said, well, Rich, maybe what you should do is create opportunities for people to do that. To do what? He says, rather than teaching it, maybe create opportunities for that to happen. And so we started internally and said, we should form community groups among people with like interests that can share their issues and problems and seek resolution among the 13 businesses that we have. And then we expanded that out across other businesses that we have as part of our large corporate structure. And then you joined and started forming this thing we called industry circles, right? And there was little guidance I gave you, right? Other than, hey Jeff, go make a mess, and out of that ideas should come. So talk to me a little bit about that journey that you went in the last 2 years, and then what's happening specifically in 26 that causes you to kind of go, I can't wait to hit today, because this is fun.
Well, I'll restate a little bit of that. Say that the thing that was the most compelling mission of Cultura was the twofold mission itself. One is we fundamentally believe that collaboration works. It's the biggest issue. And in agriculture, if we could solve that problem, we solve massive industry problems. So collaboration as a concept means you need to get people who are at most related, but at worst they don't work. They've never worked together at all.
And we believe that not only would that create opportunity, even if it didn't create like financial opportunities for us, it's the right thing to do.
Right.
It's like the absolute right thing to do is to get parts of the industry groups together to focus on things that together they could solve, or independently they can't solve.
Yeah. If you're working on the most important industry in the world and you're feeding people, if you solve problems, they make big differences. That's the key. That was a key point. So the mess that I started a couple of years ago was, how do you get people? What premise do you give them to say, why do I want to work with others either in my space, maybe they're my competitors, or outside of my space, maybe they're my supply partners. Naturally, you want to say, I'm resistant to that because maybe I'm going to give away something I don't want to give away, or I just naturally just don't have time and energy to kind of get somebody together. So what we did and why I'm excited was that premise was...
You probably had a few meetings where people showed up and their arms were crossed. Like, why am I here? Or maybe I should be here because I might miss out on something because everybody else showed up but me.
Yeah, if I get him on if I have a conversation about a meeting and I announce the audience and they don't respond for 3 seconds, then I know it's the right one. You're doing what? Okay, I understand now. But so the reality is in agriculture, we believe that you can get a small influential group together and they can solve big problems. And those if you get if you set the table right, you don't necessarily have to edict an agenda. You just say, we're going to talk. We're going to put you in a room because you're an influential party, with a loose topic. Example being, we really think that that transparency in animal feed is healthy because of a premise there. We'd say it's a tough life to be in that business. Let's get some people together and have them orchestrate what their biggest problems are. And you'd think, when we first got into this, we kind of realized you don't know what you're going to get until you get in there, and you're not trying to tell them what, give them an answer. You just want them to share their biggest problems. What has happened is agriculture, while being while the siloed and a lot of fragmentation, if you get people in the room, it's a gracious culture for the most part, and they will share their problems. And what I've experienced is they'll align around the top 5 problems. and they'll say, okay, I've got 5 or 6 or 8 of the most important people in this part of the supply chain. What do you think the problem is? And they've been open to sharing those things. Even if it doesn't belong to the technologist, me sitting in the room trying to get them to talk about, they're at least getting together and they see this as a forum. It's a little different than going into a big giant conference. This is a personal influential group and we call it a circle. The circles are, it's really a process and a system to get people to get together and share their problems. Another example, and I think this is another telling example, is you put people that are not necessarily in the same part of the vertical. So you put producer with an elevator with a processor, and you put them in the same room, and you say, what is the biggest issue? And their issue, and the producer might say, well, I never get guidance until it's too late for me to do anything about the guidance that I'm receiving. You need something from me, I don't really hear it from you until it's too late. Or I get squeezed on my pricing, or whatever those things are. And then the elevator would say, well, it would be really nice if the producer would talk to me and tell me what their expectations are for the coming year. I chase them down. Sometimes they will tell me, sometimes they won't. And the processor says, I want constant flow. I can't run out. I need it this way. And this year it's going to be, my customer is going to be, is going to be very strict on something, or a protein spread, or whatever those things are. And so that was the net effect. We had 22 circles going over the last 2 years in those kind of spaces. We talked specifically about, the essence of the industry problem that they'd like to see addressed, even if it doesn't belong to technology, even if it has, only a loose connection to things that we do. There's still goodness out of that. So what's come out of it, and I think this is what's key. You got you got an increasing consumer visibility, a demand signal. Well, and you've got this increasing ability for us to weave together data, enriching the product that the consumer ultimately wants. And you've got market trendsetters that are starting to realize that is where the market's going to go in the future. So no matter what the part of the supply chain that we're in, we're getting answers. And even somebody who is a competitor to Cultura, if they're the right player, we bring them into the mix, because ultimately the mission is about putting our industry, agriculture, in the best position to win and to serve its customers. Great example from the fuel space is that we had a whole bunch of ethanol producers get together, really came out of those discussions with a very prioritized list of what they're facing into in terms of a changing regulatory environment, and the degree of difficulty is for them to produce it, and an opportunity, to take advantage of some upcoming trends and an E15 standard and some 45Z incentives that are going to flow into that industry. And we feel really good that we have a healthy set of collaborators that are going to help that industry really achieve success. It all started 2 years ago. Yeah.
And it started with there was large farmer involved.
Yeah.
That was like technology proficient. We had a couple of ethanol producers. There was a representative of the industry. There was a representative of an audit group.
Mm-hmm. A banker.
A banker, and that's now expanded to like buyers of credits,
Mm-hmm.
and building some small prototypes that went around. That kind of expanded into, hey, wait a minute, don't forget about the retailer,
Mm-hmm.
and then that expanded a little bit. But wait a minute, don't abandon the nitrogen, like the nitrogen suppliers that are
the input
that are more compliant on the green side. That piece of it, it all seemed to come together this last year.
We were getting taken into those discussions. Don't forget on the other side, I've got the DDGs that need to go that are now are valuable because the production's going up. Now I got a DDGs market. I got a blender. I've got the big ethanol, the big fuel blenders are going to take that new fuel and put it into their system. They also get an incentive. So what started as, let's talk to a very specific part of the marketplace, which we have good saturation around in the ethanol production side, turned into farm, producer, input, retailer, and then fuel blenders, DDGs, and all the potential tax credit offset buyers. All of that was started with a single conversation in a single room with 8 people that ended up over 2 years becoming this really a network of guidance that came out, and a set of people that got comfortable enough to realize it's probably better if they don't go it alone, and they all try to go and hire their own, own teams and get 8 answers. Instead of getting 8 answers, they're all kind of aligning around, for the most part, a framework of a good answer for what they feel is an industry contribution. Rich, I want to thank you very much for having the conversation today. This was fun in a lot of ways. We're going to do a few more of these in the future, and I really look forward to telling more stories like the ones we did today.
Yeah, I know. I mean, Jeff, you and I have a lot of these conversations in private. It feels like we're now having the conversation in public. We hope other people take the lead. They walk away with something they can use in their own business. They create their own circles. They drive the business forward because, again, this industry is too big to fail. Right? And we owe it to our shareholders, our employees, our customers to get better and better at what we do for the benefit of what we do from this industry, creating value, offering opportunities, and if people can learn from these conversations, then so be it. So if you got something out of this, please hit subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.